The rise and fall of the Aztec Empire. The divine bloodline. In the heart of Mesoamerica, a land teeming with ancient jungles and sacred mountains, the Mexica tribe rises from the shadows of obscurity. Once a wandering people, they are now led by a visionary ruler, Emperor Moctezuma II, a man whose connection to the gods is as sacred as the very blood that courses through his veins. His lineage, said to be divine, is etched in the annals of the heavens, a bloodline destined for greatness. He is the living embodiment of the sun god Huitzilopochtli, a chosen monarch whose every step is believed to echo the will of the gods themselves. Under his rule, the Mexica embark on a relentless campaign to conquer neighboring tribes, expanding their influence and forging alliances through both diplomacy and warfare. With each victory, the Mexica's empire grows, an empire built upon the reverence of their gods, who demand sacrifices to ensure prosperity. The sacred city of Tenochtitlan, perched upon the waters of Lake Texcoco, becomes the jewel of their empire. Its temples reach toward the sky, reflecting the aspirations of a people who believe their fate is written in the stars. Yet, as the Mexica's power expands, so too does the weight of their ambition. The very blood that flows through their rulers is said to be imbued with divine favor, but as Moctezuma's empire flourishes, cracks begin to appear beneath the surface. A subtle dissonance stirs within the empire. Whispers arise among the common people, those who toil endlessly under the weight of the emperor's demands. The elite grow intoxicated by power, while the oppressed yearn for freedom. The gods, who once smiled upon the Mexica, seem to grow distant as the empire expands beyond its original borders. Moctezuma's vision of an all-powerful empire begins to clash with the realities of governance. The balance between divine favor and earthly ambition begins to waver, and the question arises, how long can a people remain in favor with their gods when their hunger for dominion knows no limits? Whispers of rebellion. Beneath the soaring temples and the opulence of Tenochtitlan, a quiet but fierce storm begins to brew. The majestic capital, with its intricate causeways and sprawling markets, is a city built on the blood of countless sacrifices, but beneath its surface, cracks form. The Mexica's iron grip on their subjects is slipping. While the elite revel in their lavish palaces, adorned with gold and jade, the commoners, the teeming masses that keep the empire's heart beating, toil in silence, their resentment growing like an ember in the dark. The gods, once the unshakable foundation of the empire, are now whispered to be fickle and cruel. The common folk, whose lives are dictated by the whims of their rulers, begin to question the very divine order that Moctezuma's reign depends upon. The wealth and power that have been hoarded by the upper classes seem out of reach for the masses, creating a deep sense of injustice. Warriors, once proud and loyal to their emperor, now gather in secret, their loyalty swayed by the suffering they witness in their people's eyes. Led by the fierce and charismatic Tezcatlipoca, a rising star among the lower castes, these rebels stir the hearts of the oppressed. Their chants and cries for justice echo through the streets as they plot in the shadows, aiming to topple the empire's heart, to shake the very foundation upon which it stands. Some seek an overthrow of the emperor's divine rule, while others, more pragmatically, look for a revolution that will bring a more just and equal society. Among them is Tepoztecatl, a former elite warrior who witnessed the growing disparity between his people's suffering and his own wealth. Disillusioned by the lavish lifestyle of the ruling class, he becomes a key figure in the rebellion, torn between his oath to Moctezuma and the growing realization that the empire is built on exploitation. As the whispers of rebellion grow louder, Tepoztecatl and his followers seek an ancient weapon said to be hidden in the sacred temples, an artifact that could shift the balance of power. Yet, the gods are not indifferent to the unrest. The heavens themselves seem to tremble, as omens begin to plague Tenochtitlan. A comet streaks across the sky, an omen that sends the emperor's advisors into panic. Tensions rise, and Moctezuma's once unquestionable authority begins to falter. The rebellion grows bolder, and in the streets of the great city, the oppressed begin to openly defy the empire's forces. The whispers of rebellion are no longer just rumors, they are the rumblings of an inevitable revolution. The Forbidden Alliance. In the shadowed corridors of power, the fabric of the Aztec Empire begins to unravel from within. Tezcatlipoca, Moctezuma's most trusted advisor, a figure both feared and revered, steps deeper into the shadows of his own ambitions. Known as the god of darkness and conflict, he wields influence like a weapon, his every whisper shaping the fate of the empire. But even the gods of old are not immune to temptation. A secret alliance forms, an alliance that will change the course of history. The outsider is a mysterious foreigner, his origins shrouded in myth and uncertainty. Some claim he comes from the farthest reaches of the known world, others whisper that he is a fallen priest of an ancient civilization long forgotten by the Aztecs. His name, as elusive as his past, is Hernando Cortés, an enigmatic figure whose eyes burn with ambition and whose words stir the hearts of men with the promise of power and glory. Tezcatlipoca, initially distrustful of the Spanish conqueror, finds in him a kindred spirit. The foreigner speaks of an ancient force that transcends the Aztec gods, a power that lies within the manipulation of reality itself. He claims to know how to bend the very fabric of the universe, how to break the divine chains that have bound the Mexica to their gods for centuries. This knowledge, he promises, could free the Aztecs from the chains of their faith and their emperor's divine reign. Caught between his loyalty to Moctezuma and the seductive allure of ultimate power, Tezcatlipoca begins to entertain the idea of overthrowing the very gods he once worshipped. He is tempted by the possibility of becoming a ruler not just in the mortal realm, but one who commands the divine. With each passing day, his inner conflict grows, and the once steadfast advisor begins to pull away from his emperor. His alliance with Cortés becomes more than just political. It becomes a personal pact, a dangerous gamble that could cost him everything. The forbidden nature of their alliance is not lost on Tezcatlipoca. The gods themselves seem to turn a blind eye, perhaps because they, too, are growing weary of the empire's unchecked ambition. Whispers spread through the royal court about the foreigner's influence over the advisor, but no one dares to confront Tezcatlipoca. After all, he is the voice of the gods. How could a mere mortal challenge the will of one so powerful? Yet, the dangers of such an alliance begin to surface. The city of Tenochtitlan, once a symbol of divine favor, grows restless. Moctezuma, oblivious to the growing rift within his inner circle, continues to press forward with his grand vision of empire, while the gods seem to withdraw from the world, indifferent to the emperor's commands. Tezcatlipoca, however, knows better. He is no longer just a servant of the gods. He is on the brink of becoming something far greater. But the cost of betrayal is high. The closer Tezcatlipoca gets to his newfound power, the more he risks losing his humanity. He can feel the gods watching, their silent judgment hanging over him like a storm cloud. As the web of betrayal tightens, Tezcatlipoca must decide whether the promise of divine rule is worth the ultimate price, an irreversible plunge into darkness. The omens of doom. The very skies above Tenochtitlan seem to grow heavy with the weight of a world in turmoil. The sun, once a symbol of the gods' favor, grows dimmer, its rays now piercing through thick, ominous clouds that hang low over the sacred city. The people, once confident in the divine protection of their rulers, now whisper of celestial disturbances, signs from the gods, or perhaps their abandonment. In the central square, priests gather around the great Templo Mayor, chanting fervently as they attempt to decipher the strange omens appearing in the heavens. A comet, streaking across the night sky like a fiery sword, sets the city into a state of fearful anticipation. The comet, a harbinger of great change, is said to herald both the end of an era and the birth of something far darker. The priests murmur that the gods are angry, and that this celestial event is but the first of many signs. The people, already on edge from the whispers of rebellion and dissent, now begin to feel the weight of divine displeasure pressing down upon them. The streets, once filled with the hustle and bustle of daily life, now echo with the uncertainty of impending doom. Moctezuma, once regarded as the living embodiment of the gods on earth, becomes deeply troubled by the signs. He retreats into seclusion, consulting with his closest advisors and the high priests, desperate to understand the meaning behind the celestial disturbances. His once unshakable confidence falters, and the emperor begins to question the validity of the divine connection he has always believed in. The people begin to turn against their rulers, sensing that their faith in the gods is fading. The once vibrant city, bathed in the glow of gold and jade, begins to lose its luster. Tensions rise, and fear seeps into the hearts of even the most devout. A sense of dread hangs over the empire like a thick fog. One that is impossible to shake. Moctezuma's belief that his empire is invincible, that the gods would protect them, is slowly crumbling. As the omens intensify, strange eclipses occur, turning the day into a darkened twilight. These rare phenomena, unlike anything the Mexica have seen before, send shockwaves through the religious heart of the city. The sun is swallowed by the moon, and for a brief, terrifying moment, it feels as though the gods themselves are withdrawing their favor. The high priests, those who once held unshakable authority, now find themselves in a state of panic. They cannot interpret the signs, the gods' will has become increasingly inscrutable. The once unassailable belief in divine favor begins to falter, and Moctezuma is forced to confront a terrifying truth: the gods may not be with him any longer. The prophecy that had been whispered in the corners of the court, spoken only in hushed tones among the highest priests, is now at the forefront of his mind. It speaks of a time when the empire will crumble, and the chosen ruler will face the consequences of the empire's sins. Moctezuma's worst fears seem to be materializing, as the very foundations of his rule shake beneath him. Even as the omens grow stronger, the empire's political landscape begins to shift. The power struggles between the elite and the oppressed, the growing rebellion among the common folk, and the unexplained signs from the heavens all converge, pushing Tenochtitlan to the brink. The emperor is left to wonder, is this a sign of the gods' wrath, or merely the inevitable consequence of his own unchecked ambition. The god's silence hangs over Tenochtitlan like a heavy shroud, and the once proud empire now finds itself on the precipice of a cataclysmic fall. The arrival of Cortés. Far across the vast ocean, in a world the Mexica had never before known, a storm brews, a storm that will change the course of history. The coast of Mexico, dotted with jungle-covered shores, is about to meet the foreign invader that will begin the empire's unraveling. In the distance, the faint silhouette of a ship breaks the horizon, a ship unlike any the Mexica have seen before. Its sails, full of foreign winds, carry with them not just men, but a harbinger of change, one whose ambition knows no bounds. Hernando Cortés, a Spanish conquistador, steps onto the shores of Veracruz with a quiet yet undeniable force. His presence is a spark, unnoticed at first, but soon to ignite the powder keg of ambition, betrayal, and destiny. He is not yet a legend, just a man driven by the promise of untold riches and glory, but his arrival signals the beginning of the end for the once great Aztec Empire. To the Mexica, he is but a strange figure. Foreign, mysterious, and seemingly insignificant. But Cortés, ever the cunning strategist, is far more than he appears. At first, Moctezuma and his advisors dismiss him as little more than a mere curiosity from across the sea. The Mexica, powerful and mighty, are not easily intimidated. But Cortés, patient and calculating, soon begins to weave a web of deception, slowly drawing the empire into his orbit. Through his keen understanding of human nature, he begins to manipulate both the emperor's court and the forces outside Tenochtitlan. He cleverly cultivates relationships with the tribes that the Mexica have long oppressed, offering them freedom from the empire's grasp in exchange for their loyalty. Cortés knows that direct confrontation would be disastrous, so he moves with subtlety, playing a long game of political maneuvering. He exploits the Mexica's own beliefs, playing into their divinely ordained worldview. When the priests witness Cortés' arrival, some see him as a god, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, returned to reclaim his throne. This belief spreads rapidly among the lower classes, and even some of the emperor's closest allies begin to wonder if their divine mandate has been challenged by the stranger from across the sea. The once unshakable faith the Mexica had in their emperor's divine connection begins to waver. Cortés, ever the manipulator, crafts a persona of divine power, positioning himself as a force too powerful to challenge. His every move, calculated to induce awe and fear, destabilizes the very foundation of Moctezuma's rule. But Moctezuma, unlike his predecessors, does not react with outright hostility. He is hesitant, caught between a deep-seated fear of the unknown and the political reality of his empire's position. Moctezuma's advisors, still loyal to their emperor, push for military action. Yet, the emperor hesitates. He is paralyzed by his belief that the stranger may indeed be the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, that Cortés may be the god Quetzalcoatl returning to claim his kingdom. Instead of rallying his warriors, Moctezuma sends gifts and messages of peace, trying to placate the invader. But Cortés, ever opportunistic, interprets this not as a gesture of goodwill, but as weakness. His ambition grows with every passing day. As his influence among the surrounding tribes strengthens, he prepares for the next phase of his plan, an invasion that will destroy the Aztec Empire from within. His true motives remain hidden beneath the surface. He seeks more than just land and riches. He aims to become the master of this new world, the very ruler of the gods. And so, as the first wave of Spanish invaders sails toward the heart of Tenochtitlan, the fate of the empire hangs in the balance. Moctezuma, ever unsure of his destiny, faces the greatest challenge of his reign. The gods are silent, their favor gone, and in the distance, the shadow of an unstoppable force looms, poised to strike. The betrayal within. Within the opulent walls of Tenochtitlan, as the empire teeters on the brink of chaos, the heart of the Mexica Empire is being torn apart by a treacherous alliance formed in the shadows. Tezcatlipoca, the high priest and Moctezuma's most trusted advisor, once the embodiment of divine will, now walks a dangerous path of ambition. His influence has always been absolute, his words like the decree of the gods themselves. But beneath his serene exterior lies a hunger for power that no divine connection can quell. In the secret corners of the emperor's palace, Tezcatlipoca meets with his enigmatic foreign ally, Hernando Cortés, the very man who threatens the empire's existence. What began as a cautious partnership has blossomed into a dangerously close alliance. Cortés, skilled in the art of manipulation, knows how to play Tezcatlipoca's deepest desires like a finely tuned instrument. He promises the priest a future where the gods themselves bow to their combined power, where no one, not even Moctezuma, can stand in their way. The two men, one a god of darkness, the other a conqueror from across the seas, strike a deadly bargain. Cortés offers Tezcatlipoca the chance to break free from the divine restraints that have bound him. He speaks of a world where men, not gods, hold the true power. In exchange, Tezcatlipoca feeds Cortés invaluable information, military tactics, the weaknesses within the Mexica court, and most damningly, the emperor's secrets. Cortés, in turn, offers the priest a key to the future, a world where Tezcatlipoca rules alongside him, both men seated atop the throne, with Moctezuma cast aside. As their alliance deepens, so does the betrayal within the empire. Tezcatlipoca, once revered as a spiritual guide, begins to question his loyalty to Moctezuma, whom he views as increasingly weak. The emperor's hesitation in dealing with the Spanish invaders has only fueled Tezcatlipoca's doubt. Why should he remain a servant to a ruler whose authority falters, whose connection to the gods seems to be slipping? The priests, once the unquestionable interpreters of divine will, are no longer able to guide the people with the same conviction. In the shadows of the court, whispers of Moctezuma's wavering strength begin to spread like wildfire. Tezcatlipoca's own inner turmoil deepens. He once believed his purpose was to serve the gods and protect the Mexica from external threats. But now, the very gods he has sworn to serve seem distant, indifferent to the empire's growing peril. His beliefs, once steadfast, are now shaken by the promise of secular power, power that could transcend the divine and make him the true ruler of the empire. To achieve this, he must cut ties with his past, sever his spiritual connection, and embrace a new path. The court begins to fracture as Tezcatlipoca plays both sides. He whispers doubts into the ears of Moctezuma's closest allies, casting shadows of suspicion over the emperor's rule. The rebellion among the common people grows louder, fueled by the unrest in the court, and Tezcatlipoca subtly fans the flames, knowing that the collapse of Moctezuma's authority will create an opening for his own ascent. As Tezcatlipoca moves further down this dark road, he begins to lose himself. The lines between loyalty and ambition blur, and he finds himself at a crossroads. Will he honor his divine calling, or will he cast aside his faith for a chance at ultimate power? The trust he once held in the gods begins to fade, and in its place, a ruthless desire for domination takes hold. In this dangerous game, there is no room for weakness, and Tezcatlipoca knows that for the Mexica to survive, someone must pay the price. But even as the treachery within the court deepens, the gods have not forgotten the empire. Their silence speaks louder than ever, and Moctezuma, caught in the web of betrayal, begins to sense that the forces conspiring against him are far closer than he ever realized. The clash of powers. Tenochtitlan, once a gleaming beacon of divine favor and prosperity, now trembles under the weight of internal strife and external threats. The Mexica Empire, once united under the banner of Moctezuma II, finds itself divided as never before. The looming shadow of Hernando Cortés grows ever larger, and within the royal court, the rift between Moctezuma and his most trusted advisor, Tezcatlipoca, becomes impossible to ignore. Cortés, an outsider in every sense, has already infiltrated the empire's political fabric with terrifying precision. His influence grows through calculated manipulation of both the emperor's court and the subjugated tribes. The surrounding peoples, long oppressed by the Mexica's brutal rule, now see the Spanish as potential liberators. Cortés' words, sharp and persuasive, sow the seeds of rebellion in the hearts of the oppressed, turning them against their once feared overlords. In every corner of the empire, old enemies of the Mexica, tribes whose lands have been taken by force, begin to rally around the promise of freedom from the empire's grip. But the greatest battle is brewing not on the outside, but within the very heart of the Mexica Empire. Moctezuma, though once revered as the embodiment of divine will, finds his position growing weaker by the day. His once infallible connection to the gods has been shaken, and now, his reign is crumbling from both sides. His advisors, who once stood in awe of his wisdom, are now divided. Some see him as a monarch out of touch with the changing world, a ruler whose divine favor has faded. Others, still loyal, stand by him, but their voices are growing quieter by the day. Tezcatlipoca's betrayal of Moctezuma has become undeniable, but Moctezuma, too deeply entrenched in his faith in the gods, refuses to confront the truth. Instead, he isolates himself in the royal palace, consulting increasingly erratic omens, hoping for a sign from the heavens that will restore his belief in his divine mandate. But the gods remain silent. The more Moctezuma tries to restore his authority, the more his empire slips from his grasp. His hesitation, his inability to act decisively in the face of both rebellion and foreign invasion, makes him appear weak in the eyes of his people, his court, and his enemies alike. Meanwhile, Tezcatlipoca, knowing that the emperor's reign is on the brink of collapse, continues to manipulate the situation with ruthless precision. He plays both sides, advising Moctezuma to appease the gods while secretly supporting the rebellion growing in the shadows. His alliance with Cortés grows ever stronger, and their combined forces begin to tear apart the fabric of the Mexica Empire. Tezcatlipoca's actions, though hidden beneath the guise of loyalty to Moctezuma, are now unmistakably aimed at undermining the emperor's power. Cortés, ever the tactician, knows that the moment of reckoning is drawing near. His forces are now firmly entrenched in the surrounding regions, and the Mexica are losing ground. The once unassailable capital of Tenochtitlan is now a city surrounded by enemies, both external and internal. As Cortés closes in, he plays on the divisions within the empire, using Tezcatlipoca's betrayal as leverage. He stokes the fire of rebellion, knowing that Moctezuma's failure to command loyalty will be the emperor's undoing. The political landscape of the Mexica Empire is now a battlefield where loyalty has become a commodity, bought and sold in whispered conversations behind closed doors. As Moctezuma's reign begins to falter, Tezcatlipoca's ruthless pursuit of power reaches its peak. The once pure devotion to the gods that held the empire together is now corrupted by betrayal, ambition, and the thirst for control. The empire's fate, once in the hands of divine providence, now lies in the hands of men, and men, as history shows, are driven by the most dangerous of impulses. As the final confrontation approaches, alliances shift, loyalties fracture, and Moctezuma is faced with the reality that his once immense power is now crumbling. His empire, his gods, and his very soul are at stake. The stage is set for a bloody showdown, not just between the Mexica and their enemies, but within the heart of the empire itself. The fall of the emperor. The once great Emperor Moctezuma, who once stood as the divine ruler of the Mexica Empire, finds himself lost in the shadows of his own creation. His empire, which once flourished with gold, power, and faith, now crumbles around him. The gods, who were once his closest allies, have turned silent, and the once unshakable belief in his divine favor now feels like a cruel illusion. The emperor, who had always believed that his destiny was tied to the will of the gods, is now confronted with a terrifying truth: the gods may have abandoned him. In the darkened chambers of his palace, Moctezuma, a man who once commanded armies and inspired reverence, now stands paralyzed with fear. The omens that had foretold his reign's greatness now echo in his mind like a death knell. The comet that had streaked across the sky, the eclipses that darkened the day, each sign was a whisper from the heavens, warning him that his time was coming to an end. Yet, Moctezuma refuses to act. His confidence falters, his mind clouded by doubt and the weight of his empire's past sins. Cortés, ever the strategist, begins to tighten his grip on the Mexica. His forces, though small, now occupy key positions within the empire, and his influence has begun to spread among the tribes that had once been subjugated by the Mexica. The Aztec warriors, once the pride of the empire, now seem disjointed and hesitant. Some fight for Moctezuma, while others, disillusioned by the emperor's indecision, waver in their loyalty. The tension between loyalty and rebellion grows palpable, and the cracks within the empire deepen. Moctezuma, torn between his divine duty and the reality of the empire's collapse, struggles to hold on to his once unquestioned power. But the rebellion inside the city is no longer just a whisper, it is a roar. Tezcatlipoca, once his most trusted advisor, now moves with deadly purpose. Tezcatlipoca's betrayal is the final blow to the emperor's authority. Having already begun to pull the strings of the rebellion, the high priest now uses the chaos to his advantage. As the streets of Tenochtitlan fill with unrest and the emperor's soldiers falter, Tezcatlipoca's ambitions begin to bear fruit. Yet, even as the walls of Tenochtitlan close in, Moctezuma clings to his belief that the gods will intervene, that divine justice will restore his throne. But his faith is a fragile thing, and with each passing day, it slips further from his grasp. When the Spanish forces push deeper into the city, Moctezuma's reign is finally shattered. His once commanding presence is reduced to that of a prisoner in his own palace. Cortés' forces seize him, and the emperor, once a god in the eyes of his people, is rendered powerless. Moctezuma's capture is not just a political defeat, it is a spiritual collapse. The emperor, now a prisoner of the very forces he believed he could control, must face the crushing realization that the empire he built, the gods he worshipped, and the divine favor he so desperately clung to were all illusions. The emperor's once immense power is now nothing but a distant memory, a fading echo in the halls of Tenochtitlan. The prophecy, which had been spoken in hushed tones for years, is now fulfilled. Moctezuma, the emperor who was meant to lead his people to greatness, has become the tragic figure at the center of his empire's fall. And as the empire crumbles, the emperor himself is left to face the weight of his failure, both as a ruler and as a man chosen by the gods. The shadow of Cortés. The death of Moctezuma is a bitter victory, one that tastes more like ashes than triumph. Cortés, the ambitious conquistador who set his sights on conquering a world so rich in power and mystery, has claimed the empire, but at a cost he did not foresee. Tenochtitlan, the great capital, is now a ghost of its former glory, its once beautiful streets littered with the remnants of a civilization that has been torn apart. The Mexica people, broken and defeated, now live under the shadow of the very man who sought to destroy them. Cortés, standing among the ruins of the empire he helped topple, is haunted by the weight of his actions. His conquest, initially fueled by the promise of gold and power, now feels hollow. The gods of the Mexica, once revered as mighty forces, are no longer a distant myth, they are real, and their wrath is being felt in ways Cortés never anticipated. As he revels in his victory, he begins to see signs that the gods have not abandoned their people entirely. Cortés is no longer the conqueror, he is a man who stands on the precipice of a divine reckoning. The Spanish forces, still scattered and struggling to maintain control over the fractured empire, are also beginning to sense the shifting tide. The gods of the Mexica have not been vanquished, and their power still lingers in the land. Cortés' once unshakable confidence falters as strange, unexplainable events begin to occur. His men, who once marched forward with unwavering loyalty, now question his every decision. The constant rebellions among the subjugated tribes, the unrest in the heart of Tenochtitlan, and the eerie silence from the heavens have all begun to wear on his psyche. As Cortés struggles to maintain control, he is confronted with a new prophecy, one that suggests his downfall will come not from a foreign enemy, but from within the very empire he conquered. In his dreams, the image of Moctezuma's face, twisted in sorrow, appears to him, a reminder that the emperor's death was not just a political victory, it was a moral defeat. The Mexica, though defeated, have left a mark on him that he cannot erase. He begins to see the empire's fall not as a triumph of European civilization over the barbaric ways of the natives, but as a tragic end to a people whose gods were once as powerful as his own. The weight of his actions presses heavily upon him. Cortés begins to see himself as a mere instrument in a larger, more divine game, one in which his own fate has been sealed by the very gods he thought he had conquered. The more he tries to claim control over the empire, the more the sense of foreboding grows. He is now a man cursed, walking in the footsteps of those who once sought to control the gods, only to be consumed by them. In the stillness of the ruined city, Cortés begins to question the true cost of his conquest. His soldiers, once eager to follow him, now murmur of his growing instability. Cortés knows that his conquest, while outwardly victorious, has left him vulnerable, both to his enemies and to the divine forces he has upset. The shadow of the Mexica gods now looms over him, and their wrath, which had once seemed distant, is now palpable. As the days pass and his power begins to slip away, Cortés faces an inevitable truth: the price of ambition is far higher than he could ever have imagined, and the shadow of Tenochtitlan will haunt him for the rest of his life. The final reckoning. The once glorious Mexica Empire is now little more than a shattered dream, its temples, its people, and its gods reduced to ruins. Tenochtitlan, once a city of unparalleled beauty, now lies in smoldering devastation, its grandeur no more than a distant memory. The air is thick with the dust of what was, once the center of a thriving civilization, now a mere shadow of its former self. The Mexica, though beaten, are not fully broken, and from the ashes of their fallen empire rises a new force, a force determined to reclaim what was lost. In the wake of Moctezuma's death, the Aztec people are left leaderless, their spirit unbroken but fragmented. Among them, a figure emerges, an heir to the throne, long thought to have been lost to history. This lost heir, the descendant of the gods themselves, steps forward from the shadows of the past, seeking not only to reclaim the empire but to restore the gods' favor. His bloodline, untouched by the betrayals and corruption that plagued Moctezuma's reign, is seen as a beacon of hope for those who still believe in the divine will of their ancestors. But this heir is not the man the people expect him to be. Torn between the legacy of the past and the brutal realities of the present, he carries the burden of not only his ancestors' expectations but the weight of the empire's sins. He seeks redemption, but not for his own glory, he seeks it for his people. Yet his path is fraught with danger, for the empire he seeks to restore is no longer the mighty force it once was. The gods, though watching, remain silent, their judgment clouded by the weight of centuries of bloodshed and betrayal. As the heir begins to rally the scattered remnants of the Mexica people, Cortés, now a shadow of his former self, finds himself confronted by the very legacy of the empire he helped destroy. The weight of his actions bears down on him as he is haunted by the ghosts of Moctezuma and the Mexica gods. Cortés had once believed that the conquest of the Aztecs was his greatest triumph, but now, the reality of his actions becomes clearer: the fall of the Mexica was not just a political victory, but a spiritual calamity. Cortés, burdened by guilt and fear, now faces the consequences of his ambition. He begins to see that his conquest was not just of land, but of something far more sacred. The gods, once silent, are now beginning to stir again, and their anger is directed not just at the empire that fell, but at the man who desecrated it. The reckoning that Cortés has feared for so long is now upon him, his victory has become a curse. The final twist of fate comes when the heir, now grown into a formidable leader, confronts Cortés on the very ground where the Aztec Empire once stood. The confrontation between the two men, one the embodiment of conquest and the other the last hope for a fallen empire, becomes a battle not just for power, but for redemption. As the heir's forces rise against the remnants of the Spanish army, the gods seem to awaken, their judgment now cast upon the invaders who desecrated their sacred land. The final battle is not just fought with swords, but with the will of the gods themselves. The heir's bloodline, now tied to the very essence of the divine, becomes the catalyst for a new beginning, one that will either restore the Mexica Empire or see it consumed by the very forces it once worshipped. The gods, in their final act of retribution, deliver their judgment, not just on the Spanish, but on the Mexica as well. The cycle of ambition, betrayal, and divine vengeance comes to an end. As the dust settles, the fate of both the Mexica and the Spanish hangs in the balance. The empire may have fallen, but its legacy, its gods, and its people live on. Reclaimed by the heir who embodies the final reckoning of both the past and the future.